The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of wet leaves and earth. The single mother had not planned to spend her weekend in the woods, but exhaustion had driven her to take her daughter to a nearby park for a small walk. The daughter had wandered ahead, chasing butterflies and laughing while the mother lingered, letting her thoughts drift. Life had been heavy lately. Every day was a struggle to make ends meet, juggling work, bills, and the small joys of raising her child alone. She needed a moment, a quiet place where the world's noise could fade, even just for an hour. The path she followed was familiar at first, lined with birch and oak trees that swayed gently in the breeze. But soon curiosity led her off the beaten path. She had always loved the woods for their quiet secrets. Small streams, fallen logs, and moss-covered stones made it a peaceful escape. As she walked further in, the sounds of the town faded until only the rustling of leaves and the distant calls of birds remained. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the quiet sink in. It felt like the woods were breathing with her, sharing her calm. Then she heard it, a sound that made her heart stop for a second, a faint, strangled cry coming from somewhere nearby. It was so soft she might have missed it if she hadn't been listening so closely. The mother froze, scanning the surrounding trees and bushes. Her first thought was that someone might be hurt. A cold wave of fear and concern passed over her, but she pushed it aside. She was a mother, and instinct told her she had to check. She followed the sound carefully, stepping over roots and ducking under low branches. The cries grew louder, more urgent, more desperate. Soon she saw a small clearing ahead, and her eyes widened in shock. There, partially covered in dirt and leaves, was a man. He was not moving much, and the sight made her stomach twist. His face was streaked with dirt, his eyes wide and panicked. The mother's pulse quickened. She had never seen anything like this before, and for a moment, fear threatened to take over. But she pushed it aside, replaced by a surge of determination. She could not leave him like this. "Hold on," she shouted, even though she wasn't sure if he could hear her over his own gasps. She dropped to her knees beside him, examining how he was trapped. His arms were pinned beneath the loose dirt, and he was shivering, his breaths uneven and shallow. The mother looked around quickly, realizing that there was no one else nearby to help. It was just her, alone in the middle of the woods with a man who might not survive if she didn't act fast. Her hands moved instinctively. She grabbed at the soil covering him, pulling with all her strength. Dirt slid through her fingers, falling to the ground as she worked tirelessly. He groaned, coughing, but she ignored it, focused entirely on freeing him. Every second felt like an eternity. She could feel the tension in his body, the way his muscles twitched in panic, and it fueled her urgency. She kept speaking softly to him, trying to reassure him even though she barely knew him. "Just stay still, you'll be okay," she said. Her voice was firm but calm. "I won't let anything happen to you." Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. Sweat ran down her forehead and her arms ached from the effort, but she refused to stop. Slowly, the man's head emerged from the dirt, then his shoulders. His eyes were wide, fixed on her, filled with a mix of fear and disbelief. The mother continued to pull, finally freeing his arms. He collapsed against her, gasping for air, coughing and choking as he tried to regain control. "Thank you, he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You're safe now," she said, brushing dirt from his face. Her hands shook slightly from adrenaline, but she tried to hide it. She could feel the rapid beating of his heart under her fingers as she checked him for injuries. There were scratches on his arms and legs, and his clothes were torn, but he was alive. That was all that mattered. The man's eyes, still wide and frightened, scanned the clearing, then returned to her. I don't know how to repay you," he said. "You saved my life." The mother shook her head, brushing dirt off her clothes. Just take a deep breath and rest for a moment. That's all I need." Anyone would have done the same. He looked at her, disbelief written across his face. "Not anyone. No one would have come if they saw me like this. I might have. I don't know." His voice trailed off and he leaned back, exhausted. She stayed close, helping him sit up and supporting him as he tried to catch his breath. The woods were silent again, except for the occasional chirp of a bird. For a moment it felt unreal. 1 minute she had been walking alone, enjoying a rare quiet moment. The next she had saved a man from death. Her mind spun, trying to process what had just happened. The man shivered slightly and she draped her jacket over his shoulders. "You'll warm up soon," she said softly. Her hands lingered for a moment, brushing against him to make sure he was steady. Why me?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Why not you?" she replied, a small, tired smile on her lips. Someone needed help. I could help. That's it. He studied her face as if trying to understand her, to see why someone like her, someone who had her own struggles, her own life, would risk herself for a stranger. For a long moment he said nothing. Then slowly he nodded, still trembling. You're incredible, he said finally. The mother laughed lightly, though it was more of a nervous breath than amusement. I don't feel incredible, she said. I feel exhausted and scared, but I couldn't just leave you there. The man's gaze softened, gratitude mixed with something else she couldn't yet name. He was alive thanks to her courage and determination, but he had been buried alive. Someone had meant to harm him. The thought made her stomach churn, and she instinctively pulled her jacket tighter around herself. Did someone do this to you? She asked, careful not to sound accusatory but needing to know. He shook his head slightly, too tired to speak. I don't know, he whispered. It happened so fast. One moment I was walking, the next. His voice broke and he swallowed hard. I don't understand it myself. The mother didn't press further. Right now, none of that mattered. What mattered was that he was alive, and she had done everything she could to save him. She helped him to his feet, steadying him as he took tentative steps. Every movement seemed painful for him, but he followed her guidance, trusting her instincts even though they had just met. They slowly moved toward a small clearing where the sun broke through the trees, casting warm light on the damp earth. He breathed deeply, trying to recover, and she stayed close, scanning the area to make sure they were truly alone. For now, the danger seemed gone, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone had intended this. It was a frightening thought, and yet she couldn't dwell on it, not when he still needed her support. As he regained some strength, he finally spoke again, his voice steadier this time. I don't even know your name, he said. The mother smiled faintly. I don't think that matters right now. I'm just glad you're okay. He nodded, eyes fixed on her, admiration and something softer reflected in them. I don't know how I'll ever repay you, he said again. Like I said, she replied, just stay alive. That's more than enough. They stood there for a while, the forest quiet around them. The daughter had wandered back, calling out softly, and the mother called back, reassuring her that everything was fine. She glanced at the man, noticing the raw vulnerability in his eyes, the fear, the relief, and the faintest hint of gratitude that went beyond words. In that moment, the mother realized something powerful. Life was unpredictable, fragile, and sometimes, in the strangest ways, completely life-changing. The woods had always been a place of peace for her, a place to breathe and think. Now it had become something else, a place where courage, instinct, and humanity had collided, leaving two strangers forever changed. The mother had no idea what would come next, no idea who this man truly was, and no idea how this encounter would ripple through both their lives. But in that moment, it didn't matter. She had saved a life, and that was enough. The man finally smiled faintly, a small gesture that felt like a lifeline. Thank you, he whispered once more. And the mother, exhausted but resolute, simply nodded, knowing that sometimes the simplest actions, the choices we make in moments of fear, can become the most profound stories of all. The man leaned heavily against a tree as the mother guided him toward a small clearing where the sun filtered through the branches. His breathing had begun to even out, but he still looked pale, his clothes torn and covered with dirt. The mother's heart ached at the sight of him. She had seen fear before, but this was different. It was the fear of someone who had faced death in a way that left him shaken to the core. Take it slow, she said gently. We don't need to rush. You need to regain your strength first. He nodded, but he struggled to focus. His eyes were wide, darting around as if expecting the threat to return at any moment. She realized that freeing him from the dirt had only been the first step. He needed more. He needed to feel safe, to know that someone was looking out for him, even if he didn't understand why. Do you want me to help you sit down? She asked, noticing his legs trembling. He hesitated, then allowed her to guide him to a large fallen log. He sank onto it with a sigh, running his hands over his face and through his hair. I can't believe you did that, he muttered. You didn't even know me. The mother shrugged lightly. It doesn't matter who you are. Anyone in that situation needs help. That's all I saw, a person who needed me. And honestly, I didn't even think about it much. I just acted. He looked at her, studying her face, trying to understand the strength it took to act without hesitation. He had always been surrounded by people who expected something in return for every gesture. To see someone risk themselves purely out of instinct without thought of reward was both confusing and astonishing to him. "I don't know how to thank you," he said again. Most people would have just walked away." "You don't have to thank me," she replied firmly. "I did what anyone with a heart would do." "That's it." He nodded, still shaken but slowly relaxing. She could see the tension in his shoulders easing, though the shadow of fear lingered in his eyes. She knew that saving him physically was only the beginning. He needed reassurance, and she was willing to give it, even though it meant staying in a place she had never imagined herself in, deep in the woods, with a stranger who had just narrowly escaped death. "Can you walk a little?" she asked. "Just to get somewhere safer. There's a small cabin not far from here. You can rest there and we can figure out what to do next." He looked at her doubtfully. "A cabin?" he asked. "You don't know me. Why would you even take me somewhere?" "Because I can," she said simply. "And because you need it. That's reason enough." There was a moment of silence as he considered her words. Finally he nodded, slowly pushing himself to his feet. She held his arm lightly, steadying him as he took tentative steps. Each movement seemed difficult, but she matched his pace, ensuring he didn't stumble. She noticed his clothes were soaked in sweat from exertion and panic, and the thought made her realize how cold he must have felt while buried in the dirt. She shivered slightly, imagining what it must have been like to be trapped like that, with no one knowing where you were. The walk to the cabin was slow, but it allowed them to speak quietly, exchanging small details about themselves without revealing too much. She told him about her daughter, about how difficult life had been raising a child alone, about the endless struggle of balancing work and home. He listened, nodding occasionally, but there was a heaviness in his gaze, a mix of gratitude and curiosity. I never expected someone like you to exist," he admitted. "You don't know me, and yet you risked everything for me. Most people in my life, they wouldn't even glance in my direction if I were in trouble." She smiled faintly, though it was tinged with sadness. "People often forget that we're all just human. We all need help sometimes, and sometimes it's not about who you are. It's about what you do in that moment." He looked at her, and she could see a flicker of understanding in his eyes. For someone who had spent years surrounded by wealth and influence, he was not used to simple human gestures without strings attached. It was unfamiliar, but it was also strangely comforting. By the time they reached the cabin, the man was exhausted. He collapsed into a chair near the fireplace, grateful for the warmth and safety. The mother knelt beside him, inspecting his wounds more closely. They were minor, scratches and bruises, but they needed cleaning to prevent infection. She rummaged through her small first aid kit, tending to him with gentle care, her hands steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "You're very thorough," he said quietly, watching her with an intensity that made her uneasy. "I have to be," she replied. "I can't afford mistakes, especially when someone's life is at stake." He nodded, silent for a moment. Then hesitantly he asked, "Can I ask your name?" "Of course," she said, glancing up. "But you don't need it for anything other than talking. I'm not expecting anything else." He gave a small smile, the first genuine one since she had found him. "I appreciate that," he said. The mother cleaned the dirt from his cuts, applied antiseptic, and bandaged them carefully. She worked methodically, speaking softly to him to keep him calm. He didn't speak much, but the occasional murmurs of thanks escaped him. It was clear that the physical relief of being safe was only part of what he needed. Emotional relief. The reassurance that he was no longer alone seemed even more important. "You should rest now," she said after a while. "You need to recover your strength. I'll make sure you're okay." He looked at her, a mixture of hesitation and trust in his eyes. Finally he nodded, lying back in the chair and closing his eyes. The mother watched him for a moment, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't fully process. She had saved a life, yes, but she had also become responsible for someone she barely knew. There was an unspoken weight in that realization, but she didn't falter. The day passed slowly, the sunlight shifting through the windows. She checked on him frequently, offering water, helping him adjust in the chair, and keeping watch for any signs of discomfort or pain. Every so often he would open his eyes, looking around the cabin, clearly amazed at how safe and calm it felt compared to the terror he had experienced earlier. You saved me," he whispered again. "I don't even know how to explain what that means." "You don't have to," she said softly. Just survive. That's enough. For a long time they sat together in quiet. She watched him breathe steadily, his body slowly relaxing under the warmth of the cabin. She realized that he was beginning to trust her, even though he didn't fully understand why. That trust was fragile, delicate, but it was there, and she knew it would grow if she continued to be there for him. As evening approached, the mother lit a small lantern and prepared a simple meal. The man watched, fascinated by her calmness and efficiency. He had lived a life surrounded by luxury, yet here was someone with so little who managed to care so deeply for another human being. The contrast struck him profoundly, and he couldn't help but feel a mixture of admiration and humility. When they ate, he barely touched the food at first. "I don't even know how to eat after." "Everything," he admitted quietly. "You have to," she said gently. "Your body needs strength. You'll feel better if you eat a little. Just trust me." He followed her advice, slowly eating the simple meal she prepared. She didn't pry, and he didn't ask for anything. They sat in companionable silence, the kind of silence that doesn't need words, only presence. It was a strange intimacy for two strangers, yet necessary, healing and grounding. After the meal, he leaned back, exhausted but grateful. "You're remarkable," he said softly, his voice tinged with wonder. "I've never met anyone like you." She shook her head, smiling faintly. "I'm just someone who did what needed to be done. Don't make me out to be a hero." "I'm not, but you are," he insisted. "You saved my life. You've done more for me than anyone ever has." "That's heroic." She didn't respond immediately. She knew the word carried weight, but she also understood that heroism wasn't always about grandeur or recognition. Sometimes it was quiet, unnoticed, and deeply human. "Maybe," she said finally. "But right now I just want you to get better." He nodded, and for the first time since she had found him, he allowed himself to relax completely. He leaned back in the chair, closing his eyes, and let the exhaustion take over. She watched him for a moment longer, then rose to check the door and windows, ensuring they were secure. The woods outside were dark, shadows stretching across the clearing, but the cabin felt safe, warm, and protected. As she settled near him, keeping watch, she realized something important. The moment in the woods had changed everything. It wasn't just his life that had been saved, it was a beginning for both of them. They didn't know it yet, but the bond formed in fear and courage was the first step toward something neither could have imagined. And as the night deepened, the mother felt a quiet satisfaction. She had acted without hesitation, without thought of reward. She had helped someone in their darkest hour, and for now that was enough. The next morning, the cabin was bathed in soft sunlight. The man stirred first, blinking as he adjusted to the brightness. He had slept deeply for the first time since the incident, and the calmness of the morning seemed to bring a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in days. The mother was already awake, tending to a small fire and preparing something warm to drink. She moved quietly, careful not to startle him, but the moment he saw her, he gave a faint smile. "You're up early," he said, his voice still hoarse. "I couldn't sleep either," she replied. "I kept thinking about what happened yesterday." She handed him a cup of tea, and he accepted it with a grateful nod, cradling it in his hands as the warmth spread through him. For a long moment they sat in silence, the only sound the faint crackling of the fire and the occasional bird outside. Finally he spoke, his voice low and hesitant. "I should tell you something." The mother looked at him, curious but cautious. "What is it?" He took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for what he was about to reveal. I'm not ordinary," he said slowly. "I mean, I don't expect you to understand, but I'm wealthy, very wealthy. I own businesses, properties, investments. A life that most people only dream of." The mother blinked, startled but not shocked. She had guessed that he was important, or at least not just an ordinary stranger. But she had not expected this. She studied his face carefully, searching for signs of exaggeration or deceit, but all she saw was honesty and vulnerability. "And?" she asked quietly. "Does that change anything?" He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. It might," he admitted. "People in my world, they don't understand acts of kindness that aren't motivated by something. Most people assume that if you help someone, you want something in return. That's why I'm shocked. And grateful. But I've also realized that trust is complicated for me." She took a moment to process his words. It was strange to see someone with so much power, so accustomed to influence, speak with such humility. "You helped someone once too," she said gently. By surviving and being honest about who you are, you give people the chance to help you too.
That's life.
We all need it sometimes. He looked at her, admiration and something deeper reflected in his eyes. I've never had anyone like you in my life, he said quietly. Someone who acts without expectation. Someone who just cares. The mother shook her head slightly. You don't need to overthink it. Yesterday, it wasn't about your money, your status, or anything else. It was about life and helping someone in need. That's all, but now you can focus on recovering. He nodded, still holding the cup of tea, his mind racing with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. The idea that someone could act purely out of kindness was almost foreign to him. He had spent his life surrounded by people who smiled with hidden motives, who offered help only when it benefited them. And now here was this woman, someone who had risked herself to save him, expecting nothing in return. It was humbling, and it made him question everything he had known about human nature. I don't know how to repay you, he admitted again. I feel like my life has been saved twice, once physically and now emotionally. You've given me something I didn't know I needed. Trust and hope, the mother smiled faintly. Then don't think about repayment. Just think about living. That's enough for both of us. For the next few hours, she helped him clean himself more thoroughly, tending to his bruises and scratches. They worked in quiet companionship, the occasional conversation flowing naturally between them. He began to share small fragments of his life, not details about his wealth, but about the pressure and loneliness that had come with it. He spoke of the constant scrutiny, the people who pretended to be friends but were only there for gain, and the isolation that wealth often brought. I've never known what it means to have a friend who doesn't want something from me, he confessed quietly, and I think I've forgotten what it feels like to trust someone completely. The mother listened carefully, understanding the depth of his vulnerability. She had faced struggles of her own, raising a child alone, battling financial hardships and navigating a world that often judged her for her circumstances. She understood what it meant to feel alone yet still persevere. Trust isn't easy, she said softly, but it starts small. One act, one choice, one moment. Yesterday was that moment for us. He looked at her, a mixture of relief and awe in his eyes. I can't believe someone like you exists, he said again. Someone who acts with courage, kindness, without expecting anything in return. It's rare, she shrugged lightly. Maybe it's rare, but it's real. That's what matters. As the day went on, he grew stronger, moving more confidently around the cabin. They shared a simple meal, and she encouraged him to rest, though he resisted at first. I should be moving, making calls, figuring out what happened, he said. Not yet, she replied firmly. Your body needs time, and your mind does too. You can't fix everything at once, he sighed, finally accepting her guidance. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to simply be cared for without thinking about obligations or appearances. It was a strange sensation, and it made him feel both vulnerable and safe at the same time. As the afternoon sunlight softened, they sat together outside the cabin, enjoying the quiet of the woods. The air was filled with the scent of pine and damp earth, and the distant sounds of bird song added a peaceful rhythm to their conversation. They spoke about small everyday things, childhood memories, favorite foods, and the beauty of nature. These small exchanges built a bridge between them, creating a sense of connection that was surprisingly easy and natural. Your daughter, he said quietly at one point. She's lucky to have you. The mother smiled, warmth in her eyes. She's the reason I keep going. Every struggle, every sacrifice, it's all for her. And one day, I hope she'll understand that life isn't just about surviving. It's about helping others along the way. He nodded thoughtfully, reflecting on her words. I've lived a life surrounded by wealth and influence, but I've never had someone who taught me that lesson in such a real way. I think I needed this more than I realized. As evening approached, a soft wind rustled through the trees, and the man finally revealed the part of his story he had been hesitant to share. I was targeted, he said quietly. Someone wanted to harm me. I don't know why yet, but I suspect it has something to do with my business dealings. That's why I was buried in the woods. I should have been more careful, but I never imagined someone would actually try to kill me. The mother's heart raced. The danger he faced was real, and the thought of it terrified her. Yet she did not panic. Instead, she focused on keeping him calm and grounded. You're safe now, she said softly. We'll figure it out. For now, just focus on resting and recovering. You're not alone." He looked at her, gratitude and vulnerability mingling in his eyes. "I don't even know how to describe what you've done for me," he said. "It's more than saving my life. You've given me a reason to trust again." She smiled faintly. "Then just hold on to that. That's enough for both of us." As night fell, they returned to the cabin. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow across the room. He sat quietly, reflecting on the events of the past day. His mind raced with questions, gratitude, and a growing sense of admiration for the woman who had saved him. "You know," he said after a while, "yesterday when I was buried, I thought it was the end. I thought no one would find me and I was ready to give up. But then you came. You gave me life again. And more than that, you reminded me that there's still goodness in the world." The mother looked at him, her eyes soft. "There is. You just have to be willing to see it. Sometimes it shows up in the most unexpected ways." He nodded, his thoughts heavy but his heart lighter. "I don't know what the future holds," he said quietly, "but I know one thing, I won't forget you. I won't forget what you did. You saved more than my life. You saved a part of me I thought I'd lost forever." She reached out, placing a hand gently on his arm. "And you'll keep it safe," she said. "We both will." The night grew deeper and the woods outside the cabin were quiet. The man finally allowed himself to relax completely. Leaning back and closing his eyes, the mother stayed close, keeping watch, her mind filled with thoughts about the fragility of life, the power of courage, and the unexpected ways humans can impact each other's lives. In the darkness, a bond had begun to form, one built on trust, gratitude, and the raw honesty of shared vulnerability. Neither of them knew where it would lead, but both understood that life had changed in that single, extraordinary day, and as they sat together, two strangers connected by fate and courage, the man whispered softly, almost to himself, "Thank you for everything." The mother smiled, her heart quietly swelling. "Just live. That's all I ever wanted." The morning sun filtered gently through the cabin windows, casting a warm glow on the small room where the mother and the man had spent the night. He stirred first, stretching carefully as if testing his body after the ordeal. The physical discomfort from the previous day had lessened, but there was still a weight on his mind that he could not shake. He had survived something unimaginable, and the woman who had saved him was still here, sitting calmly by the fire, quietly making breakfast. "You're up early again," she said, noticing him stretching and rubbing his arms. "I couldn't sleep much," he admitted, his voice soft. "Thought about everything that happened yesterday." She nodded, understanding all too well. The mind often lingered on moments of fear and life-changing events, refusing to rest until it made sense of them. "It's natural," she said. "You survived something terrible. Your body and mind just need time to catch up." He watched her work in silence, making a simple meal of bread and eggs, and for the first time, he felt a sense of normalcy. It was small, ordinary things that made him realize how far removed he had been from life like this. No luxury, no security, no wealth, just a warm cabin, sunlight, and someone genuinely caring. The simplicity of it made him reflect deeply on how complicated he had made his own life. "I can't believe I'm sitting here eating breakfast like this," he said quietly. "After yesterday, it feels unreal." The mother smiled faintly, offering him some bread. "Life has a way of changing suddenly," she said. "One moment everything is fine. The next everything shifts. What matters is how we respond." He looked at her, admiration and curiosity blending in his gaze. You make it sound so simple," he said. "But yesterday you risked yourself to save me." "That's not simple. That's extraordinary." She shook her head lightly. "It doesn't feel extraordinary when you do it. It feels necessary. You needed help. I could give it. That's all." He took a bite, savoring the warmth of the bread, but his mind was elsewhere. He had grown used to control, to knowing every detail of his life, yet here he was, depending on someone he barely knew. The thought was both unsettling and strangely comforting. For the first time in years, he realized that not all strength came from wealth or power. Some strength came from humility, from human connection, and from the willingness to care for others without expectation. After breakfast, the mother suggested they take a short walk outside to enjoy the fresh air. He agreed, needing to move, to feel alive, and to remind himself that he had survived. The woods were quiet, serene, and still, The sun illuminated the leaves in a way that made the forest look golden, almost magical. They walked slowly, side by side, the silence between them comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. "I can't stop thinking about how close I came to never seeing the light again," he said quietly. "It's terrifying to realize how quickly life can change." She nodded, her expression serious. "It's a scary thought, but it's also a reminder. We can't control everything that happens to us, but we can control how we respond. Courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about acting even when you are." He glanced at her, impressed by the clarity in her words. "You have a way of seeing things that I've never learned. I've spent my life surrounded by people who talk about courage and loyalty, but few ever truly understand it." You do," she smiled faintly. "Experience teaches lessons we can't read in books or hear in speeches. I've had my own struggles. Life isn't easy when you have responsibilities, when you have people depending on you. You learn to act even when it's hard." He nodded slowly, reflecting on his own life. He had wealth, influence, and status, yet none of it had prepared him for the vulnerability he had felt buried in the dirt. He had always believed that power could protect him, but he realized now that some things, human connection, courage, compassion, were far more valuable. As they walked, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, and he found himself smiling more than he had in years. She shared stories about her daughter, about small victories and simple joys, and he shared bits of his own past, without revealing too much, about childhood memories and lessons learned. Slowly, the walls of caution and suspicion he had built over decades began to crumble. "You know," he said after a pause, "I've met a lot of people in my life. Many claim to be kind, generous, or trustworthy, but it's rare to find someone who truly is without expecting something in return. You're one of those people." She shook her head. "I don't feel special. I just do what I think is right. Life is unpredictable. Sometimes you have to act without thinking about reward or recognition." He looked at her thoughtfully. "That's the hardest thing for most people. Even I've always calculated, always planned. But yesterday you acted without hesitation. That's rare courage." They walked in silence for a while, letting the serenity of the forest soothe their minds. The man felt an unusual sense of calm, despite knowing that danger still lurked somewhere out there. He was alive because of her, and he knew he could trust her even if he didn't fully understand why. It was a fragile trust, yet powerful in its simplicity. As the afternoon approached, they returned to the cabin. The mother suggested that he rest while she tended to some chores nearby. He agreed, sinking into a chair by the fire. She noticed the tension in his shoulders easing, the way he was beginning to relax, and it brought her a quiet sense of satisfaction. He was strong, but he needed time to heal physically and emotionally, and she was determined to help him do that. Hours passed, and she continued to care for him, preparing meals, making sure he was comfortable, and listening when he spoke. He began to open up more, sharing fears, frustrations, and hopes he had long suppressed. Each revelation brought them closer, forming a bond that went beyond gratitude or simple friendship. It was built on trust, vulnerability, and the understanding that life was unpredictable and fragile. "I've been alone for so long," he admitted quietly one evening. "Even surrounded by people. I've had wealth, yes, but no one I could truly rely on. I've built walls around myself thinking it would protect me. But yesterday, you tore those walls down without even trying. You just acted." She looked at him, her eyes gentle. "Sometimes walls need to be broken. Not by force, but by trust and compassion. You survived because someone cared. That's not weakness, it's human." He nodded, a quiet smile forming. "I've never been understood like this before. I don't know if I ever have. You make it easy to believe that people can be good, even when the world seems cruel." Her smile widened faintly. "The world isn't all cruel. There are people who act with kindness even when it's hard, and sometimes those people find each other in the most unexpected ways." That evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of pink and orange, they sat together outside the cabin. The man glanced at the mother, gratitude and admiration clear in his eyes. "I don't know what the future holds," he said softly, "but I know this. Yesterday, today, all of this. It changed me. You changed me, and I won't forget it." She reached out, placing a hand gently on his arm. "Then hold on to it. Let it remind you of what matters. Courage, trust, and human connection, they are stronger than any wealth or power." For a long moment, they watched the forest in silence, the calmness of nature wrapping around them like a protective blanket. The man felt a deep sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He realized that wealth and status were meaningless compared to the simple, profound human acts that had saved him, acts he could never repay with money or gifts. "I want to do something for you," he said quietly, his voice filled with resolve. "Not because I have to, but because I want to. I want to make sure you and your daughter are safe, comfortable, and happy. You deserve that after everything you've done for me." The mother shook her head, smiling softly. "You don't need to do anything. You survived. That's all I ever wanted. Everything else will happen in time." He persisted gently, unwilling to accept that nothing could be done. "I insist," he said. "I want to help you. I want to repay the life you saved. Not because it's expected, but because it's what I feel is right." She studied him for a moment, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. Finally, she nodded. "Then we'll figure it out together," she said. "But for now, just focus on being safe, healthy, and alive. That's all that matters." As night fell, the forest outside grew dark, filled with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant animals. Inside the cabin, the fire burned warmly, casting shadows that danced across the walls. They sat together, sharing quiet conversation, laughter, and stories. The man realized that trust and human connection were far more valuable than anything he had ever possessed. And the mother saw in him someone who, despite fear and wealth, could be genuine, vulnerable, and human. By the end of the evening, a bond had formed, a bond built on courage, trust, and the shared experience of facing fear and surviving. Both knew that their lives had been changed by a single act of bravery, and neither would ever forget it. And as they prepared for bed, the man whispered softly, almost to himself, "Thank you. For trusting me, for helping me, for being you." The mother smiled faintly, exhaustion and warmth in her eyes. "Just live," she whispered back. "That's all I ever wanted." The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of earth and pine. The mother stirred first, glancing out of the cabin window at the woods bathed in golden light. She felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense that despite the fear and uncertainty of the past days, things were slowly settling into a new rhythm. Her daughter had been playing nearby, happily chasing shadows and leaves, completely unaware of how close danger had come. The mother smiled, feeling grateful for the small joys that reminded her of life's preciousness. The man emerged from his room moments later. He moved with more confidence than the day before, but there was still a cautiousness in his steps, a reminder of how fragile life could be. Seeing the mother tending to the small breakfast she had prepared, he felt a swell of gratitude that went beyond words. He wanted to say something meaningful, but no words seemed enough. Instead, he simply watched her, taking in her calm strength, the quiet determination in her gestures and the warmth she brought into the cabin. "Good morning," she said softly, smiling as she handed him a cup of tea. "Good morning," he replied, taking it with a careful grip. "Thank you, again, for everything." She shook her head lightly. "Don't think about it. You're alive. That's enough. That's all that matters." He looked down at the cup in his hands, thinking about the weight of her words. She had saved him without expecting anything, and now she continued to care for him without hesitation or judgment. It was a lesson he had never learned in all the years of wealth, power, and influence he had accumulated. He realized that true kindness wasn't something you could buy or demand. It was something you gave freely without conditions. After breakfast, they decided to take another walk in the woods. This time it was different. The fear and tension that had been present the first day were gone, replaced by a quiet ease. The sunlight filtered through the trees, creating dappled patterns on the ground, and the sounds of birds and rustling leaves filled the air. For the man, it was a reminder that life continued even after moments of darkness. For the mother, it was a chance to breathe, to feel the peace of the world around her, and to watch the man regain some of his strength and composure. "You've changed me," he said quietly as they walked. "Not in ways I expected, not with wealth or gifts, but by showing me something I had forgotten." "And what's that?" she asked, glancing at him. "Trust, hope, the idea that people can act without expecting something in return, that courage isn't about power, it's about the choices we make when it matters most." She smiled faintly, touched by the honesty in his voice. "Then hold on to that. Let it guide you. And don't forget that life is fragile. Every moment counts. They walked in silence for a while, each lost in thought. The man realized that he had been given more than a second chance at life. He had been given a chance to see the world differently, to value the human connections he had long ignored. And the mother, though exhausted from the ordeal and her ongoing responsibilities, felt a sense of satisfaction and hope. She had acted in a moment of courage, and now life was offering a quiet reward, a bond that was deep, genuine, and unshakable. As they returned to the cabin, the man grew more contemplative. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," he began. "About helping others, about making choices even when it's hard. I want to help you now. Not because I feel obligated, but because I want to. I want to make sure you and your daughter are safe and comfortable. You deserve that after everything you've done for me." The mother looked at him, her eyes soft but cautious. "I don't need gifts or help. I just want to live my life, care for my daughter, and be safe. That's enough. But I insist," he said gently, refusing to let her dismiss him. "Let me help. Let me give back in a way that matters." She studied him for a moment, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. Finally, she nodded. "All right, but we'll take it slow. Nothing rushed, just thoughtful choices, okay?" He agreed, a small smile forming. "Deal." Over the next days, he began discreetly helping her. He made arrangements to ensure her daughter's schooling was secure, provided support for the home, and even helped with small improvements around their cabin. He did it quietly, without fanfare, respecting her independence while still showing his gratitude and care. The mother noticed, of course, but she appreciated the thoughtfulness more than the scale of his help. It was not the wealth that mattered. It was the intention behind it, the quiet way he showed he cared. Through these interactions, their bond deepened. They shared stories of the past, fears about the future, and dreams they had long held in their hearts. The man spoke of his lonely childhood, the pressures of wealth, and the isolation he had felt despite having everything he could ever want. She spoke of her struggles as a single mother, the challenges she faced, and the small victories that kept her going. With every word, every shared glance, trust and admiration grew between them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, they sat together outside the cabin. The daughter had gone to bed, and the quiet of the woods wrapped around them like a protective blanket. The man turned to the mother, his voice soft but filled with resolve. "I know I can't erase what happened," he said. "I can't bring back the hours you spent worrying, the fear you felt for me. But I can promise this. I will do everything I can to make your life better. Not just for you, but for your daughter, too. You've given me something I didn't realize I needed: hope, trust, and a reason to believe in people again. I want to give that back." The mother's eyes softened, touched by the depth of his words. "You've already given me so much," she said. "You've shown me that people can be kind, generous, and human. That's more than anyone could ask for." He reached out gently, taking her hand in his. "Then let me show you that life can be good, even after the darkest moments. Let me be someone you can rely on." A quiet moment passed between them, filled with understanding and unspoken promises. The woods were still, the only sound the distant rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. The man realized that his life had been forever changed, not just by the near-death experience, but by the woman who had saved him and the bond that had grown between them. The mother looked at him, her heart quietly swelling. She had acted without thought of reward, but life had a way of balancing things. She realized that trust, courage, and human connection could create something beautiful, even in the aftermath of fear and danger. And now she felt a quiet hope for the future, for herself, for her daughter, and even for the man who had come into their lives in the most unexpected way. In the following weeks, their relationship continued to evolve. The man respected her independence, never pushing too far, but always ensuring she had the support she needed. They spent time together, sharing meals, walks in the woods, and quiet moments of conversation. Slowly, laughter returned, and the heaviness of fear and tension lifted, replaced by a sense of comfort, trust, and understanding. One day, as they walked along a familiar path in the woods, he stopped and turned to her. "Do you remember the first day I met you?" he asked quietly. She nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "How could I forget? You were buried in the dirt, and I was terrified." He laughed softly, a sound that held both relief and warmth. "I was terrified too. But in that moment, something changed. I realized that life could be different. that people could be good and that courage and kindness mattered more than anything else. And it all started with you. She looked at him, touched by his words. It didn't start with me, she said. It started with the choice we both made to act, to trust, and to care. That's what changed everything. He nodded, understanding the truth in her statement. And now, I want to keep that alive. I want to make sure that the bond we've formed, the trust and hope we found, continues. For you, for your daughter, and for me. As they continued walking, he glanced at her, a quiet determination in his eyes. Life gave me a second chance, not just to survive, but to live differently. And I want to do that with you. The mother felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet joy that she hadn't felt in years. Life had been hard, unpredictable, and often cruel, but it had also shown her that courage, kindness, and human connection could create something extraordinary. And in that moment, she knew that the future, though uncertain, held the promise of hope, trust, and perhaps even love. That evening, as they returned to the cabin, the man turned to her, his voice soft and sincere. You've saved me in more ways than one. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this. I will always be grateful, and I will always be here for you and your daughter. That's a promise, she smiled, her eyes glistening. And I'll always remember what you've shown me, that life can be good even after the darkest moments. That trust, courage, and kindness are stronger than fear and wealth. We'll face whatever comes next together. As night fell, the cabin was filled with warmth, light, and the quiet understanding that life had changed for them all. The daughter slept peacefully, the woods outside were calm, and two people who had come together by chance, by courage, and by trust, knew that their lives had been forever transformed. And in the stillness of the night, they understood something simple, profound, and human, that sometimes one act of bravery can ripple through life, creating hope, trust, and a bond that nothing can break.